Hey guys, this is your host Nitin Binhani and a very warm welcome to my startup podcast channel Jazair Audio, where we share real stories with real learnings. Now, there are plenty of reasons why founders sell their startup. Either things are doing great or not so good, or founders are tired of a particular industry, or they have come across an exciting sector or a problem to work on, or they want to take handsome returns and enjoy for the time being, and or the personal issues. So the reasons can be many. The question arises whether a founder can really set up his or her startup for a possible acquisition. If yes, then how? And so in today's podcast, I invited Parag Dole, the Managing Director of Inventus Capital India, to share his insights on the startup acquisitions and how should one go about it. So let's welcome today's special guest. Hey Parag, welcome to Jazair Audio. Great to have you here.
Thanks for inviting me.
So let's start with, why do corporates or startups acquire other startups?
So Nitin, various reasons, and maybe I'll illustrate some of them using examples from our portfolio. For example, Redbus was acquired by IBEVO, Naspers group, now part of MMT. They had an airline offering but didn't have a bus. Bus is a slightly different market. So that was one reason. InstaHealth got acquired by Practo. InstaHealth was a hospital information system company. Practo had lost a deal with a major hospital where InstaHealth was part of the solution of the rival company. And they decided this is a B2B kind of a space. So they decided that to fill in their offering, they needed something like InstaHealth, and that's why they acquired it. We had a company called eDream Fund 2, which was acquired by Imbibe, which is part of the Reliance Group, Geo. So that was more of a technology acquisition. The actual business of the company was fairly small, but they paid decent amount of money for the IP. And that was mainly an IP acquisition that the adaptive technology that Imbibe needed was what eDream provided. Fourth example is Socrati, which is a company acquired by Dentsu. That is a classic case of an incumbent wanting to take out a disruptor in some sense because digital advertising was growing. They didn't have much knowledge in that. So they wanted to get into that space and acquired that. So these are some of the ways. And there are others as well. I presume taking out a competitor like Ola did for Taxi for sure is also one of the ways. And I'm sure there are others as well. But this should give you an indication of why acquire other companies.
So to summarize, what could be the key reasons?
So it's to grow market share, it's to expand in a new segment, expand in a new geography, technology acquisition, killing a competitor, any of those.
When is the right time for a founder to sell his or her startup?
It's very personal decisions, typically, where people have gotten tired of the industry that they're operating. They have been doing quite well, but they have gotten tired. That could be one of the reasons, one of the timing reasons for doing so. Second, a bird in the hand is better than two in the bush, isn't it? So at a young age, 30, 35 years of age, if you're making 40, 50, 100 crores, would you pass it up for this thing of making 1,000 crores maybe 5, 7, 10 years later? So those are some of the reasons that people decide, or they might be facing challenges on the GTM side, the go-to-market side, feel that tying up with a large company will help that. Or in eDream's case, GTM challenges, but had good technology, so they did this. So it comes in different flavors. There's no specific reason, and it is a personal at the end of the day. But I should say, if you have venture capital in you, then you should know that there's a timeline to it, and that typical timeline is anywhere by years. So if you raise venture capital, you should know that you should be ready to sign up for it.
Now, let's say a founder decides to sell his or her startup, then how should he or she prepare it for a possible acquisition?
So, see, it's always easier to be bought than to be sold, isn't it? When trying to sell yourself, it is always harder. The right steps at that point in time is if you are not big enough for an investment bank, let's say it's a 5-10 crore acquisition only, then to that extent you will have to do it yourself. You'll have to find the usual specs yourself. But if it is a reasonable place, then you should also keep in touch with this community called investment banks. They should also know about you so that at a point in time, if that unfortunate or fortunate situation comes, they can help you out in that scenario simply because they do this on a daily basis. They know all the acquirers, they know all the corporate development teams at an Amazon, Microsoft, wherever you could possibly fit in. So that is a community that you keep in touch with. Having said that, there are people who take very good steps. Let me give you an example. Socrates, for example, Ashish Mehta, who was the founder and the CEO, co-founder CEO, he made it a point to get to know all of these large advertising agencies, and then so eventually bought him as that. But he made it a point to know the India heads of each of them. So one of the agencies bid, and then so over. So that way, what happens is people know who you are from the very beginning. They are tracking you. The possible acquirers are tracking. And Ashish did that very well. So if you're one of those founders who has a defined time frame, 5, 10, 15 years, or you think that in 2 years your this might get disrupted, or your personal life is taken over, whatever be those circumstances that you are in, you should be taking some of these steps that Ashish took, for example, to ensure that you find it. But when you start a venture, I think exit is probably one of the last things you should be thinking about. It happens rather than is made to the time.
Now, quite often, even the acquisitions fail. Then how should one prevent it from happening?
See, Warren Buffett, I think, says beautifully about acquisitions. They fail mainly because of the optimism inherent in human beings, isn't it? When the corporate development guy is trying to do it, he draws up an Excel which makes a lot of sense and shows a lot of synergies which do not pan out. So most of the time, that's why 60-70% of the acquisitions failed. I mean, we must say we are proud is that most of our acquisitions are done very well inside of the parent company. Deep Kalra, for example, thinks about Redbus as a jewel in his portfolio. To that extent, I think if both sides are clear and realistic about the goals that they are trying to achieve, that is a good place to be. And if there is a well-defined transition plan, because most entrepreneurs feel constrained in a large company. Let's just be honest about that. If you look at executives continuing in a large company, I think probably the YouTube guy stayed along in Google for a long time. That was the only one. And maybe the guy who founded, Andy Rubin, I think his name was, who founded Android inside Google. He also stayed for a while. But ultimately, 2-3 years is the maximum that I have seen. Typical life. So to that extent, you should also be practical about that you're not going to last that forever because you are an independent-minded business. When I say you, I mean founder. So to that extent, you should also make sure that you do enough to take care of any back-ended payments that might be due, etc. And it is a win-win for both sides. That's important. But that's easier said than done, especially with larger, because there are too many pull pressures.
So based on any of your portfolio companies, could you spell what's the journey like from growth to IPO?
So we have just one IPO, Policy Bazaar. We invested in 2013, the company is 2008 come. So when we were investing, the company was a leads company, okay? It used to provide leads service company, which has a market, but it had a defined market in the sense that it would never be a large company. It was just about transitioning to a transaction company at that point, and which meant integration with all the insurance parts, etc., technology side, as well as much more advanced call center, if you will, to take care of the demand, much more informed, much more substance in the call center, just serving up leads to the insurance company. So that transition took some time, went well, especially in term and in the health product, which continues to be the flagship. Then the company added this business called about Paisa Bazaar 5.5 years ago, brought in a good executive from Aviva to run it, and he's done a good job of coming from behind leader. And eventually the company grew to be 800, 900, 1,000 crores size, almost profitable, and is currently. So it's a question of the inherent drivers that are there in the marketplace, how you position yourself. For example, Policy Bazaar became the default destination for choosing policy, for comparing policy, for example. That is the brand that they create. So those are some of the things that you do besides beefing up team. On last 2 years, the corporate governance part of it has to be focused on a lot. Both parts on, you bring in larger investors over a period of time, Tigers, stock banks, and all of that. So all of that is the journey that you go through from this to IPO. Again, there is nothing typical about it. There are some companies go on a different scale, or a different path, but there are some elements that are common.
Finally, can you please share a brief about Inventus Capital and its investment thesis?
So we are a pre-Series A, Series A focused fund. investing in technology companies. Technology for us means consumer internet, software as a service, deep tech, and fintech. Those areas. Fairly broadly technology, I should say. Technology going into the real world, but not the real world itself. So we'll invest in technology going into real estate, but not real estate. So that's what we do. 5 to 15 crore checks initially, 25 to 30 crores in an average in a typical company over a period of time. We run a 369 crore fund and we'll make about 13 investments from this fund. We have done about 11 and we'll raise out. So that's kind of what we do, who we are, how we.
So with this, we have reached at the end of this podcast. Parag, it was a pleasure to have you on Desire Audio and thank you for sharing great insights with us.
Thanks.
Are you a founder of an early stage startup and looking to raise funding? Get your startup investor ready before even you start pitching to your prospective investors. For know-how, please visit www.jazaro.in. That is www.jasaro.in.
Lastly, I want to thank all the listeners who took their valuable time to listen to this podcast. Keep rocking, be safe, and don't forget to share.